In October, the MPR team met for our final workshop, which promised to give us our biggest challenge of the project so far. Our task was to push the concept of participation even further by exploring how you might work with water as a research partner. Although this might seem strange at first, with flooding being a major issue in the UK, there's lots of interest in adopting approaches that work with water rather than always defending ourselves against it. So we saw our workshop as part of this shift in how knowledge is being produced around water issues. The workshop was based in and around the Torridge River, which is part of a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve. In order to learn more about the international significance of the area, the workshop opened with a presentation by Andy Bell, who is the coordinator of the reserve. Rather than trying to isolate the river from the larger catchment area, this team is working collaboratively with communities across the region to develop holistic water management strategies. With this overview in mind, we spent our first full day experiencing different aspects of the river. In the morning, we were joined by Becky Aston from the Devon Wildlife Trust, who took us in search of the source of the Torridge.
It's 72,000 hectares across the whole of the Torridge catchment.
We visited some of the column grasslands that the Trust helps to protect. As we scrabbled over embankments, crawled under fences, leapt from fern patch to fern patch, we wondered about our desire to find the source, when actually everywhere we went, we were encountering water that would become part of the river. In the afternoon, we shifted from the grasslands where the river originates to the river mouth where it joins the sea. We had dallied a bit too long in the morning and so raced to meet our skipper Dave Gay before we missed the tide. All of us piled into the boat, some with mixed feelings, and then set off up the river to experience the transitions between fresh and salt water. We putted about, testing salinity levels, so we could see how the Torridge was mixing with the sea. We particularly noticed how the area changed as we went upriver, with human habitations giving way to homes for trees and birds. That evening we heard from Anthony Lyons, Tim Collins and Reiko Goto, who told us about their collaborative river-focused art projects they had been involved with. On day 2 it was time to actually get in the water. We had been told about a wild swimming site midway up the Torridge, and we were all keen to have a splash about. Wetsuits, bathers and waders allowed us to experience this part of the river for ourselves. We noticed the changes in flow as the river moved toward and under the bridge, and the changes in ourselves as we relaxed into the water. After a poetry recital and a brilliant game of poo sticks, we headed on to our final session of the day at the Royal Horticultural Society Gardens at Rosemore. Using the same model that we developed for our Dogs and Trees workshop, we spent the first half of the afternoon using what we'd learned from the workshop to identify potential research projects and working in groups to sketch out how these projects might take shape. We were interested in exploring the kind of language people used about the river, which often suggested that it had its own kind of agency, as well as issues to do with water flow and the way rivers draw together different communities. Using the guidelines for ethical participatory research, which had been developed in an earlier phase of the Connected Communities program, we looked at whether the same ethical dilemmas would apply to working with water. A whole range of issues came up that we are still digesting. For most people, talking about water in the abstract was a real problem. We instead tended to talk about the river and its watershed, and came to understand this social ecological community as our actual research partner. When we tried to think about the ethics of working with water, we were struck by the strange friction that was created. We didn't find any concrete answers, but we did appreciate the opportunity to think about participation in strange new ways.
What does it mean to keep the river kind of seriously in mind while you're doing the kind of analysis?
Does a river care about confidentiality?
Does the river appear to be kind of more flourishing once the weir is removed or not?
Could you co-analyze data with a river?
So what happens when you think of making art with the river?
What do things like consent and privacy mean in relation to water?
To what point in evolution humans are part of the river ecosystem?
Another potential methodology to distribute advocacy for the river amongst the team. Another way would be to hire an artist to be the river.
We'd kind of like to give the river a voice.